Hey, I'm Caleb Anderson, and this is the Spirit Farm Podcast, where we help you be your unique, whole, and healthy self. And that's what we're doing on this episode. We're going to take a deep dive into why you feel the way that you do. And the reason you feel the way that you do is not about the thing that happened. It's about the way you're thinking about the thing. And I'm going to interview brilliant psychologist John Jolliffe. He's a regular on the podcast, one of my good friends, a therapist of mine, mentor of mine, and you are going to love getting to know John if you haven't before. We're going to take a deep dive into the ABCs of life, as John calls them, and we're going to talk about rules to kind of guard your thinking, how you're thinking about the things that are happening in your life that are causing you the feelings and emotions that you're experiencing. Have a notebook handy. You're going to want to write some things down. Share this with someone that you think it could serve. If you haven't subscribed to the podcast or reviewed the podcast, please do that. It helps. It means a lot to us. We love seeing the reviews and the comments and the shares and the posts on social media. And without further ado, let's jump into this intense therapeutic session with John Jolliffe. John Jolliffe, welcome back. It's great to see you. Great to be able to chat with you on the podcast today.
Yeah, thank you, Caleb. Thanks for having me back. Spirit Farm broadcast is one of my favorite things to listen to. When I can slow down, I just listen to some of your podcasts and some of your interesting guests. Thanks for being one.
Absolutely. Thank you for saying that. And you are our most regular guest that we have on the show. We love having you back. And it's been a little while, but a while back we talked about needing to follow up on something that came up at the end of an episode. We were talking about the ABCs.
That's right.
And the theme was emotional re-education and how we needed to get into the ABCs of life and emotions to really kind of get a hold of who we were designed to be, how to get our minds right, how to be who God intended us to be.
That's right, because you asked me a question at the end of our very interesting discussion last time. You said, can you tell us a little bit about the ABCs? And that's kind of like saying, can you tell us a little bit about the life of Jesus? It's kind of like, wow. And so I said, why don't we give an IOU and come back and let's revisit the whole concept of the ABCs, because there's a lot of things to say.
Well, and I wanted to make sure that we did that, John. And the reason why I brought it up before is because it's had a profound impact on me. Mm-hmm. And in my relationships, it comes up, it comes to mind. I think about it. I think about this kind of simple approach to why am I feeling the way that I'm feeling? And so I'm grateful to you for your influence in my life. And I wanted to explore this with you for the benefit of a lot of others.
Yeah. Well, excellent. Thank you.
Let's jump in. And well, first, let's start by saying, how did you come up with this? Like, when did it click for you that this was so paramount? Because you've been a therapist for decades, helping tens of thousands of people. But when this became kind of like a cornerstone of your work, and how did it come to you?
Well, as I kind of looked at, and somebody, I don't know if it was you that was interviewing me or somebody, but they said, you've been a therapist, a psychotherapist for 40 years. How many people is that? How many consults actually is that? I said, I would have no idea. And they said, well, just you can figure it out, count them. So I took the time and came up with 96,000 consults.
Wow.
In 40 years, yeah. Wow. And so as I began to observe people coming into my office, people would invariably say they didn't like the way they felt.
Yeah.
Very few people ever come into my office and say they don't like the way they think. And yet, as I observe the scene, thinking, beliefs, opinions, the stories we tell ourselves become critical to how we feel and function. And so I'm going to break down the ABCs, but I'm going to tell you that this is really the way counselors, therapists, and coaches actually work and operate. So somebody comes into the office and they have an issue, a complaint. So you try to identify what's causing the problem or what is the problem. And so they tell you. And then you get into, so what do you think about this? How do you counsel yourself about this? What's your perspective on this? And then they tell you how they think. And then they tell me how they feel. And they oftentimes talk about their behavior. And so just to make this kind of more formalized, I created the ABCs. It's really the ABCs of therapy, but it could be the ABCs of emotional re-education, because we oftentimes have to re-educate ourselves in terms of what is the influence? Where is the problem? So many times we're treating symptoms as problems, and they're really symptoms.
That's right.
Alcoholism is not a problem. You and I have talked about this. Alcoholism is not a problem. It is a solution to a problem that creates more problems than it solves. So what is the issue for which alcohol was the attempted solution?
Yes.
See, what's the problem? So we want to identify the problems.
Well, and that's why, and people come in because they probably haven't identified the problem. They think the problem is this way that they're feeling, right? I mean, that's how you started. You don't see people that are just kind of, trying to level up from an A- life to an A life. You see people who are feeling like crap. You see people who are anxious. You see people who are in the midst of divorce or whatever. So
but I see the people who are doing fabulous in life, and they come in and say, I know there's another gear.
Okay.
I know there's another level.
Good.
And that's one of the best times to come to counseling or therapy is when things are going wonderfully.
Yeah.
That's usually the time when people avoid it. But if you came into counseling and therapy when things are going wonderfully, hitting in all cylinders, we could then do the forensics and figure out what are you doing right so you can keep doing it.
That's a great point.
Not what you're doing wrong and try to find what's right. But you're already doing something. You've got an amazing life. Things are going really well. What are you doing?
Yeah.
And is there another gear? Is there another level to this?
Yeah, I love it. You just sold therapy to everybody, wherever they are on the spectrum, whether things are going hard or going bad or things are going well. It's relevant. Right. I love it. Okay, so people come in.
Okay, so
generally they're not feeling well.
And here's the ABCs. If they look at the graph, ABCs. A fact, event, or situation occurs.
Okay.
Thousands of them a day. And so you write in the fact, event, and situation. This is kind of a journaling kind of exercise.
Okay.
A is the fact, event, or situation. Right.
Yes.
B, we then think about that fact, event, or situation. We counsel ourselves. Self-counseling is the most effective counseling there is because we take our own advice. We oftentimes wonder if we can trust somebody else's advice, but unfortunately, we trust our own. Yeah. Self-counseling is the most effective kind of counseling there is, but unfortunately, effective does not always mean beneficial. So we start talking to ourselves, self-talk, inner dialogue. This is the B. A is the fact, event, the situation. B is the self-talk, inner dialogue, the self-counseling.
Okay.
You write that down, you number it. Number one thought is this. Number two thought is that.
And with the B, we're trying to identify what we're saying to ourselves about A.
Exactly right. When our lips don't move, there's a conversation going on.
Yeah.
And you want to kind of get that out and get it on a piece of paper so you can actually evaluate. And when you start writing it, if it sounds ridiculous and unverifiable, keep writing. Because if you're thinking about it, I want to know about it. The third thing is you're going to have feelings and emotions. Feelings and emotions come as a result of your thinking. So we live in an ABC world where things happen, we think about those things, and we have a feeling or emotion. Depending on your thinking, you may feel disappointed or frustrated. Depending on your thinking, you might be violent. You might lose your mind. See what I mean? It's the quality of our thinking that leads to the quality of our feelings. Now, if there was a D, it would be behavior, because we oftentimes act out the way we feel in behavior.
Yeah.
But if you think about it, we live in an ABC world, but that's not how you were raised, Caleb. That's not how I was raised. Everybody listening to this broadcast was not raised in an ABC world. They were raised in an AC world. Now,
Straight, you're saying A to C, skipping over the B.
Yeah. They don't even realize there's a B there. And therefore, they blame A for the way they feel at C. And if that were true, if we actually lived in an AC world, then the only way to improve the way you feel is that you would have to divorce that person. You would have to move from that neighborhood. You'd have to quit that job. You'd have to stop being that person's friend. Because if the A is your problem at C, that's the only choice you have in order to feel better is to change A. But it's never been true.
It's never been true. So yeah, I love it. And what you're saying is, in some other words, is this happened, and because this happened, I feel this way. This person,
that's AC.
This person behaved this way, and so as a result, I feel like this. This person let me down, so I feel, and that's skipping the B. That's jumping. That's an AC kind of relationship.
So there's three parts to what we're talking about today. We're going to go into two parts. The first part is to actually introduce the idea that B exists.
Okay.
You live in an ABC world. The second part of this is to get you to capture your B. All day long, when all the thousands of A's that happen, situations, events, facts, be aware, increasingly more aware of your self-talk, that inner dialogue.
Yeah.
The third phase will be, once you've captured your thoughts, remember the Bible talks about that?
Yeah.
Capture your thoughts and hold them to obedience of Christ. Remember that?
Yeah.
But once you capture your thought, the third part of this is debating your thoughts, standing up to the bully, which is you, and begin to debate and argue another perspective, another point of view. And that's how you really get control of your feelings and emotions.
So being aware that there is a B, and then capturing what the B is, what the thought is, and then retraining it or informing it or standing up to it or telling it, hey, that's not true. That might be a lie.
Let's say you had a reoccurring A. Something that happens, you go to work and there's this maybe employee or employer that you just lose your mind over. Okay? Your self-talk is making it far more complicated than the problem you already have. You're working with an irregular person. And now your self-talk inner dialogue is making it all the more difficult. And you're not liking the way you feel, and you're blaming your feelings on the horrible, irregular boss. Once you can identify your self-talk, we go over here and then we begin to debate our self-talk. If it's a reoccurring A, the next time you go in the office, you don't want to default to your B's. You want to default to your debates of B.
Say more about that. What do you mean?
So when you debate your B's, you're going to write down your debates, right?
So we're journaling.
You got your B written down. Well, you'll see when you look at the column, you'll see, and I'm getting ahead of myself because I'm not showing you the third step. But what I'm saying is when you debate your B's, you will actually write down the debates.
Okay.
And then I would ask you to memorize those debates. So the next time your reoccurring A shows up, you default to the debate rather than defaulting to your simple B that has caused so much of your trouble.
Yeah, I like that. And the way you started talking about the A to C is that if it's an A to C relationship, then you just have to quit that job, right? Because the boss is a jerk and I feel crappy all the time because the boss is a jerk.
The facts, events, and situations if you live in an AC world.
Yeah. The problem is out there with him, with them, with someone else.
But then so much of Scripture doesn't make sense. So the Bible says, think on what is true and lovely and anything worthy of praise.
Mm-hmm.
Think on and dwell on these things, and the God of peace will guard your hearts and minds in Christ Jesus.
Yeah.
Well, if the problem is A and it's not B, where does that scripture work?
Right. Right.
If it says, capture your thoughts into the obedience of Christ, if it says, as a man thinketh in Proverbs, as a man thinketh to himself, so is he. Where does that fit in an AC world?
Yeah.
It doesn't. That's why you live in an ABC world, and we can be responsible and accountable for our B's.
Yeah.
Let me ask you two questions. Can you think anybody's B's for them?
No, I'm responsible for my own B's.
You can't digest somebody else's food, and you can't think their thoughts, right? Therefore,
right.
From this time forward, you can never take responsibility for how they feel. Because what makes them feel unloved? What makes them feel angry? What makes them feel any of the things they feel?
However, it is that their B is talking to them.
Their self-talk. You can be compassionate. I'm sorry you're upset. I'm sorry you're angry. I'm sorry you don't feel loved. But you can't take responsibility and say, I'm sorry I made you angry. I'm sorry I make you feel unloved. Second question.
Yeah.
Can anybody think your B's for you?
No.
No. They can't digest your food, and they can't think your thoughts. So from this time forward, you can never blame anybody else for the way you feel.
Yeah. Yeah. So
now remember, if there's 7.7 billion people in the world, there are 7.6 billion who don't know what I just taught you. And yet you'll see it operating all the time.
Yeah. Yeah.
You'll see people blaming this and
everybody
taking
blames
responsibility for how other people feel and how I made you feel and all that confusion.
Yeah. Well, and it's easier. I think that's just becomes our default because it's easier. It's easier to blame them or the situation than to take responsibility. It feels easier, but it makes us miserable because then we don't kind of take responsibility for our own lives.
Or if somebody won't take responsibility, it's sometimes easier, or at least we think it is, if we take responsibility for them.
Yeah.
They're not going to take responsibility, so I'll blame myself.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm sorry I make you feel unloved. I'm sorry I make you upset. I'm sorry I disappoint you. I'm sorry and then you wonder why you don't like those people. Because you're always at fault with those people. Either they're blaming you or you're blaming yourself about them.
Yeah.
Let's make it a level playing field. Everybody goes through ABCs. Everybody's responsible for their B and therefore their C's. If you look at the ABCs, that's the whole world. Things happen, you think about them, and you have a feeling and or behavior. That's what the world is. And what part of that can you change? You oftentimes can't change A.
Yeah, A's happen a lot out of our control, so we have to take responsibility for B.
And if you take responsibility for B, you also take responsibility for
C.
And if there was a D, it would be behavior. So at least 2/3 of your world you're in control over.
Yeah. And the C is a byproduct of the B. So when we take control of the B, we're going to generate a better feeling or emotion by nature of being responsible for the B, right?
That's exactly right. Exactly right.
And so the way that you're saying to do that is first to acknowledge that there is a B.
Yep.
It's my thinking about this situation that is going to be either the problem or the solution. And it's my thinking and taking that responsibility. And then if we're having trouble, if our thinking is not helping us at the moment, then we debate it. Then we throw truth at it. We talk to it. Do you have some thoughts on best practices for doing that? Because I would imagine that for a lot of people, it feels daunting. Like, I don't know. These are just the thoughts that I have. I don't know what to do about it.
Yeah.
So how do you coach people?
So many people confuse thoughts with feelings. If I were to ask somebody and say, you've just heard about the ABCs, how do you feel about that? They would say, well, I feel this could be very practical. Well, that's not a feeling.
Right.
That's a thought.
Right.
I think this could be very practical.
Right.
Well, if you thought it could be very practical, how would you feel? Hopeful, calm.
Yeah.
You see,
Yeah.
we oftentimes get our feelings and thoughts confused. And one of the reasons is we may be gut thinkers. In essence, every feeling we think is a thought. You know, I feel you don't care about me. No, you think I don't care about you. See, the other reason we do that is because if you want to preserve your beliefs, call them feelings, because feelings cannot be debated. Thoughts can. Feelings can't be debated. So if I say, I feel like you don't care about me. You didn't have me on last week, so obviously I feel like you don't care. And then you say, no, that's not right. Oh, wait a minute. I'm just telling you how I feel.
Yeah, you can't tell me how I feel.
Tell me what to think. And thoughts can be debated. Feelings can't. I mean, if you're depressed, you can't debate that. You either are or you aren't. Right. But thoughts and opinions and beliefs can be challenged.
That's interesting. So let's go back to our situation with the tough boss at work.
Yeah.
And you're thinking about that is leading you to a negative emotion, and you're just thinking, my boss either needs to get fired or I need to quit. How would that thinking versus feeling distinction work? How would someone complain about the boss that's actually not a feeling, that's their thinking?
Yeah. Well, they say my boss is making me crazy. I'm in the wrong marriage. I got the wrong kids. You know, and more often than not, it's this that's off. It's this that's wrong.
Yeah.
We are the wrong people we married. It's not we married the wrong people. We are the wrong people we married. We weren't in the right headspace. We're not in the right headspace. The thing that attracts us to other people is what is missing in our own life or our marriages. It's not that we're attracted to those people. We're attracted to what they brought into our lives that's been absent in our marriages or our personal lives. Now,
so when you say, just before you leave that, because that's so good, when you say we didn't marry the wrong person, we were the wrong person, does that, like, where do you go from there? If so, in a dynamic for someone who's listening and their negative emotions are related to their marriage or are related to a dating relationship, and
they really aren't. They're related to their thoughts and beliefs
about that relationship,
about what that person said or what they did or something like that. Yeah. Same thing with the boss. You know, you shouldn't quit your job before you quit thinking the way you're thinking. You ought to go to work on capturing your B's about your work and about your boss. You ought to capture those B's and debate some of those B's, because you might be able to save your employment. You see what I mean?
I do see what you mean. And you said that to me a long time ago too about marriage. I remember it. You said you might have to redefine your relationship to save the marriage or something like that.
That's right. You might have to terminate your relationship in order to save your marriage. Now, we could go and say, you may have to terminate your conversations with yourself in order to save yourself. If you want to be in a better place emotionally, psychologically, spiritually, you may have to look at that emotional diet you've got going on inside. I'll tell you one thing that I know for sure, take it to the bank. More people are entertaining unverifiable thoughts, and they would be shocked to realize how unverifiable most of their B's self-talk inner dialogue is. Yeah. Now, I have 5 rules. These 5 rules, in my opinion, help you get to the mind of Christ and the example of Jesus. I was just speaking to an organization, a Christian organization that is trying to take fathers, husbands, men in the community, break them down so they can build them up and make leaders out of these Christian men and fathers and husbands. And I met with him, and he'd heard about some of my work. I met with him and I said, I think there's a loftier goal. I don't think you're shooting high enough. Quite frankly, I'm really surprised that you're trying to make leaders. My advice to you would be stop that right away. This CEO and founder says, that doesn't seem right. And I said, I know.
This is what we do.
I said, but think about it. If this is a Christian organization and you're a Christian, where are you getting your template on leadership? Would it be Jesus? Well, Jesus was no leader, and Jesus never taught leadership. He never built leaders. If you remember when Jesus encountered people on the way, right? He would invite them. And do you remember what the words of his invitation were?
Follow me.
Follow me. What Jesus did is not develop leaders. Pelosi, Trump, Gaddafi, they're all leaders. You don't want to follow those people, some of them. What Jesus did was he developed people into people that other people would follow. If you want your children and your wife to follow you, then you better develop yourself in a way, develop the tools, the skills, and most importantly, the self-talk that helps you stay in the game. Don't disqualify yourself. Don't lose your mind over whatever. And you've got to stay in the game so that people watch you, because we're all being watched. And it was your example that does more teaching than your words. You've got to trust the messenger before you can trust the message.
Yeah.
And so I'm going to give you 5 rules that I think actually help you develop the mind of Christ. They also help you with the ABCs. Okay?
Yeah.
Because as I just discussed, there's a big subjectivity going on in our heads, in our lives. And we don't often distinguish or differentiate between objective thinking and subjective thinking.
Correct.
You're in an airplane and you're in turbulence, the wings are flapping, and there's a person in there thinking, we're going to all die, this plane's going to crash. And that's highly subjective. There's no facts there. Okay, so here's the 5 rules. I could have had 3, I got 5. The first thought for optimum mental and emotional health, in order to have the mind of what I think is Christ, you have to think objectively. Another word for objectively is truthfully. It says, think on what's true. Philippians 4:8. Think on what's true and lovely, anything worthy of praise and good repute. Think and dwell and meditate on those things. It never says think on what's positive. Positive thinking, unfortunately, was brought into the church. Positive thinking is no healthier than negative thinking.
What do you mean by that?
Negative thinking is not true. If I said this is the worst podcast I have ever watched, that would seem negative. But the more important point is it's not true. If I said this is the best podcast ever, I've ever seen, ever heard, ever been on.
Ever in existence.
Ever in existence, yes, in the universe. Then that would sound very positive, but the problem is, it's probably not true. And all we need is the truth. So rule number 1 is when your thinking is based on objective reality, not subjective reality, not speculation, not worry, not supposition, but when your thinking is based on Philippians 4:8, it is true, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health. Now, how do you know what's true from what's not? I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to give you a tool, and you'll never forget it. You'll use it everywhere you go. If you can take a picture of it, it's called the camera rule of thumb. Camera rule of thumb. If you can take a picture with something with a camera, you know it's true. If you can tape record something, you know it's true. In essence, if you're thinking, I would rather be somewhere having lunch than talking to you, can you tape record that I actually said that?
No, if you're just thinking it, no.
You're thinking it. And no, you can't tape record that. You're entertaining a subjective thought. You're reading into the thoughts and motives of other people. Can you take a picture? I'd rather be at lunch than talking to you. No. If you can't verify a thought, it's unverifiable. If it's unverifiable, it's more likely untrue. Drop it from your consciousness. Do not entertain unverifiable thoughts. Camera rule of thumb. If you can tape record, you think somebody thinks something of you, can you tape record they said that?
What would you say, John, to the person who would argue, yeah, but 70% of language is body language, and I can tell by your face that you're bored? Would you say, well, maybe, but maybe this is just my resting face, or I have an upset stomach?
Tell me whether you think this is true or not. Body language tells you something's going on, but it doesn't tell you what.
Yeah,
body language is not articulate.
Yeah, good.
You have to read into it.
That's right.
And if you are a subjective reader, if you entertain a lot of unverifiable thoughts, you're going to entertain unverifiable conclusions.
Yeah.
So stick with the principle. The first principle is when you're thinking objectively, when you can prove what's true, tape record it, take a picture of it. If you can stay objectively and think truthfully, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health. Rule number two is rarely going to come into play. When your thinking helps you preserve your life, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health. A thought that I'd be better off dead than alive does not help you preserve your life. But that's rarely going to come into play for most of us. Rule number three, when your thinking helps you accomplish your goals most quickly, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health. When your thinking gets you get in your own way with your thinkings and suppositions and speculations on unverifiable thinking, you're not going to accomplish your goals most quickly.
Yeah, well, so and probably fears and insecurities.
Tied to rule number one, think verifiably.
Okay.
Rule number four, when your thinking helps you keep out of significant trouble with other people, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health, the mind of Christ. I do not believe that Jesus ever talked himself into trouble. I think when people were trouble, I don't think they were trouble for him. I think Jesus understands there are no difficult people.
Yeah, I mean, he talks sternly to those.
We make people difficult by the way we entertain our thoughts and our feelings and all that. We make people difficult. They're difficult for some people because of the way we think and process and the stories we tell about ourselves, and we blame them for all kinds of things.
Yeah,
so
I see what you're saying. Rule
number four is when your thinking helps you keep out of significant trouble with other people, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health. Please.
What about the person who is like the justice person, and they're like, well, this person is doing something that is not good, that is harmful, where is that argument fit in to, I don't want to have trouble with this person, but I need to stand up for myself or for whatever?
Well, I never saw that in Jesus. I'm going to go confront that person because they're creating all this kind of trouble. You might see somebody troubled, confused, frightened, angry, and you could go over there and minister to those people. And if your self-talk is correct, you're not going to be afraid of those people. You're not going to be concerned about what they think of you. And you're not going to be arrogant. You're going to be humble, and you're going to go minister. People are only difficult because we make them difficult.
Yes, I totally agree with that. Yeah.
Rule number 5. Go ahead.
I was just going to say that I think that's a brilliant line that I wanted to make sure that we capture. People are not difficult. We make them difficult. And so again, it's back to our thinking about this situation, this person is what is making this a challenge. It's what's making this a label. It's what's making this whatever it is. It's making it bigger than it is. And not allowing that to be the case is what keeps us at peace and mental health and aligning with the mind of Christ.
Jesus was confronted by people who wanted to kill him, who thought that he was just a carpenter's son. Don't take him seriously. They were critical. They were argumentative. They said all kinds of false things, even the Sanhedrin in the trial. And you never saw Jesus rude. You never see him lose his cool, because he thought differently than we typically think. I bet you he thought most truthfully. I bet he didn't entertain unverifiable thoughts. I bet he was more objective than ever subjective. I bet he accomplished his goals more quickly because of his mind. I think he probably stayed out of trouble, significant trouble with other people. Now, he might have been trouble for somebody, but he wasn't creating that trouble. And also, rule number 5 is that when your thinking helps you prevent or quickly eliminate significant emotional conflict, you're going to have optimum mental and emotional health. Your thinking helps you prevent significant trouble with other people. It prevents significant emotional conflict. Now, Christianity is not about perfection. We have a path. If we're studying the way, we know what the path is. 1 Corinthians 13, Sermon on the Mount. And we have a lot of instruction about what the path is. When we fall off the path, we measure maturity not by perfection. We measure maturity by how quickly you can recover.
Yeah.
And the quicker you can recover, the more maturity you're showing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, because there's a lot of us who we beat ourselves up because we still struggle, or because we did that, or because we're feeling anxious thoughts, and so we get hard on ourselves because of the symptoms that we're feeling, as opposed to bringing it back to recovery, bringing it back to the center, and just getting right back on it, just changing the thinking. Because it's that beating ourselves up, it's the negative self-talk, the negative B, that's going to perpetuate more of the problems.
That's exactly right. So I was giving a talk at a church yesterday, and I was talking about the Apostle Paul's comment, "Be an imitator of me as I am of Christ." And I wondered, and I challenged the people. I said, how many of you are ready to say, "Be an imitator of me as I am of Christ"? If you see me, you see Christ. How many of us are willing to do that? And so I said, one of my experiences in focusing on this topic and preparing to teach it is that I have never been under such difficulty in 1 week than I was last week. And I think it's because I was so focused on trying to be an imitator of Christ. My gardener cut my internet cable to the house. So for 4 days, I'm searching, why don't I have internet? I got computer people in looking at my machine, the modem, spending hundreds of dollars trying to figure out, until one day I found the cord just standing out there in the grass. He cut the vines and cut my cord. Okay, so that's making me lose my mind, having internet for 5 days, 4 days. And then I do a wedding, and the father of the bride, he gets in my face 10 minutes before I go on to do the wedding for his daughter. And he says, your rehearsal was the ugliest, dumbest, stupidest rehearsal I have ever been associated with. Now I'm thinking, that's the wedding coordinator. That's not me. I'm just standing there. The wedding coordinator is doing all this. Don't blame me. What's my? And then he says, and I'm not going to do what you want to do. I'm not going to have anybody say anything other than myself, because I wanted to have the groom's mother and father both give their son to the wife, the new bride, but also to receive the bride as a member of the family. And they would say, we do. Yeah. And then I wanted the mother and the father to say, not only do we give our bride to the groom to be his wife, but we also receive, the groom to be a member of our family. We do.
Yeah. Yeah.
He didn't want any of that. He didn't want the other people speaking, and he didn't want his wife to say anything. And he wanted to be the one who said, her mother and I do.
This guy sounds like a gem.
He took the front page of my talk and ripped it up.
No way.
10 minutes. Now he's in my face, so close, I can feel him breathing. Now, if I was in my 30s, we would have gone down. We would have had some kind of altercation.
Scene at the altar.
There was, and now everybody's in their seats.
Oh my gosh.
And the bridal party is ready to come down the aisle, and he's in the podium with me, turning up the page. And I'm thinking, if I push him or hit him, there's no wedding. If he pushes or hits me, there's probably no officiant. So there's not going to be a wedding here in about 5 minutes. If I don't, and then I thought about, I'm giving a talk tomorrow on imitating Christ. How in the world would I hit him? Would that be imitating Christ? So I took a step back. And it's because I had that in my mind. I want to be like Christ. I want people to follow me. I've got to behave. I've got to think. I've got to treat people in ways that other people will follow my lead. You have to trust the messenger in order to trust the message. Mm. And so throughout the whole ceremony, the father's standing right there. The father of the bride standing right in the front row, right? I'm talking about the love of Christ and Jesus, and God calls us to be married and all that. And I'm looking at him and I'm thinking, knock your teeth out. And then I'm talking about the love of Christ. And I had this dichotomy going through the whole service. And I was thinking, I never would have been tested if I didn't make a goal to be an imitator of Christ.
Yeah, yeah.
I imitate myself very well, but imitating Christ, not so well.
Yeah. Well, but your point was that perfection, it's not about focusing on being perfect. It's about the speed of recovery.
That's right.
And
I recovered enough to do the wedding.
Yeah, clearly you didn't punch him in the teeth, so that's a win. and probably even Paul is not trying to project that he's perfect, because in other places, in other letters, he wrote that he was the worst of all sinners, right? And that he was a train wreck in some departments, in some areas. And so he's not claiming perfection. He's probably saying what you're saying, that you can follow me because I'm just following the best I can and coming back to recovery with speed as much as I can when I mess up.
Wouldn't it be wonderful if he had actually said that?
Yeah.
I'm trying to do the best I can.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because that's what we're trying to do, right?
That's what we're all trying to do.
But
just
I
stumbling our way there.
I think the optimum mental and emotional health is threefold. You have to be aware of B. You have to start capturing and writing down your B in any given situation that you're unhappy about. And then you have to learn to debate your self-talk and your inner dialogue, because some of these things need to be debated. And if one of your thoughts, take B1, if that thought violates 3 of the 5 rules, doesn't have to be perfect, but if it violates 3 of the 5 rules I've just given you, it has to be debated. There's no question. If it violates the 3 of the 5 rules. And then you go down through your whole list of Bs. If any of those violate 3 of the 5, they've got to be debated. And you'll probably find most of them in bad situations all need to be debated.
John, that's so good and so helpful. So just to bring it back around again, the A is the event, the B is how we're thinking about it and talking to ourselves about it. The C is how we're feeling and the behaviors associated with. And instead of jumping to, hey, I feel this way because of him, because of her, because of this.
That's what all blame is AC.
That's what blame is. Yeah. Yeah. And so instead of that, saying, okay, what is it that I'm thinking about this? And using your 5 rules to reflect on that thinking, and then to start to debate or inform or change or renew our minds so that we're thinking in a healthy way, which will lead to positive feelings and emotions. Maybe we quit the job. Maybe we need to be maybe we decide to be out of the relationship or this, whatever the situation is, but we don't know that until we're thinking right.
That's right. Until you don't give up on A, whatever A is, until you have a debated B, identified B and debated the B where it needs to be debated. I'll give you one last quick story. I used the illustration of baseball, but you can use any sport. When we go to the stadium to watch the baseball players, that third baseman he dives for the ball, gets up and throws across to first base, maybe turns a double play. We are so impressed. But what we don't see is the discipline and the honing of that skill and preparing themselves, their body and their minds, to be able to deliver that athletic ability on that field at that one moment. We don't see all the hours, hundreds of hours to go into perfecting that.
Yeah.
And yet we think that we can go to church for 1 hour a week and we can be imitators of Christ. You can't. You've got to hone that craft. You've got to discipline your mind. You've got to work on this so that when the time comes and there's situations there that need to be handled, you handle it as Jesus would. But that's only because you practice and hone your skill. And the ABCs is one of the ways that you can become very comfortable.
Yeah. Thanks, John. These ABCs are relevant to everybody. And as you said, they're kind of the ABCs of life and how we experience the world. So hugely beneficial and helpful. And I know that it continues to drive the conviction deeper about how I want to manage my Bs and be intentional about it. I hadn't thought about the debating recently and just kind of, debating those, arguing with the thoughts and making sure that they're...
Once you recognize Bs and you start capturing your Bs, most people stop right there and they say, well, I'm just going to stop thinking that now. Now that I know what my thoughts are and you're troubling me, I'm going to stop thinking those. And so what you do is you bury them alive. And they're going to resurrect themselves at an inopportune moment. The only way to bury them dead is to debate them, stand up to them. They're bullying you. Stand up to the bully, debate them, challenge them, use the 5 rules, demand that your thinking fulfill as many of those 5 rules as possible based on truth, helps you preserve your life, get your goals accomplished most quickly, keeps you out of significant trouble with other, and either prevents or quickly eliminates significant emotional conflict. Discipline your mind up.
Yeah. That's beautiful. John, as always, great to have you. It's great to glean from your wisdom and your insight and your years of helping people get their Bs right. And I always enjoy our talks.
Thank you. All right.